New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community. Proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Good to be back again. Today we have Stephen Phillips from Snyk joining us. How are you, Stephen?
Doing very well, Paul. Rest and relaxed. Looking forward to what the year has for us.
Yeah, well, I think we're off to a pretty interesting start. There's, so many things going on in the world of technology. Some really cool local, New Zealand news that would be good to delve a little bit into. And then there are things on a global basis. So we want to delve into a little bit of the cybersecurity sort of landscape for 2022. That's very much your world. So keen to delve into that. But
absolutely.
A whole lot of other things. And a pretty interesting NFT story for those that are whether you're curious or not. I think this one is pretty fascinating, I think. So
it's something I think we should get our children into, because it looks like it's
the future.
It's the future.
Yes. Well, it's very, very, very interesting space. So look, there's one story that I wanted to get into to start with, and this was from Henry Burrell, who works with Business Desk and was on the show with us just a couple of weeks ago, and he has covered off or done a little article about a startup that happens to involve a Kiwi and is involved in the world of autonomous vehicles. And look, as regular listeners will know, this is certainly an area that interests me. So they've raised $294 million in capital. So this is a pretty interesting project. The company is called Wave, and Alex Kendall, their CEO, is a Kiwi. So it's pretty cool to see these sorts of things going on with New Zealanders doing smart things all around the world.
Yeah, and was his the technology that didn't rely on the LiDARs and things? It was doing it off standard cameras and the likes.
Yeah, and
using software. Yeah,
there seem to be a few players that are doing that, but yeah, they've just raised around $200 million, US. So they referred to it as 294 million, I guess, in New Zealand dollars. And look, I'm really I was very fascinated by the space as we've kind of watched it for a number of years. We learned that it's getting closer, but we're never quite 100% there.
Yeah.
But one day we will be at that point, and there will be some interim stages where the technology either just makes such a difference from a safety perspective for normal drivers, or we start seeing more widespread varying sort of services that operate, and we see aspects of this technology in use around the world, but that's a really sizable sort of investment to get, which says to me this is a pretty serious serious company.
It's got to be something happening there, because if you can sort of get the same outcome from commodity hardware, with edge computing actually in your car, as opposed to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of kit, it's going to make cars available autonomously at different segments of the market, which is going to make a difference. So I can see why there's a lot of interest, right? Because this could give some of the other car manufacturers the ability to actually break into the head start that Tesla's got. So,
and I mean, there's obviously a lot of debate around what Tesla are doing and their approach, and making their owners, beta testers, which I guess an owner has to.
Yeah.
You pay for the privilege of their so-called FSD.
Yeah.
Computer and either subscription or outright purchase when actually it's it's only part way through the journey in terms of being able to deliver. And one of the discussions I heard we had recently actually was around, well, will this just be something that's just free, right? It's just part and parcel of a car, and you've got to imagine that will be the case at some point in time, but how long does it take to get there? And when you've got a company like Wave, for instance, developing this technology, they're going to want a reasonable sort of payback.
Correct.
And there's a level of obviously the hardware, the cameras, and the computing power to do this. So it does seem in the earlier years there's going to be a premium for this, but you can imagine
it'll commoditize over time.
It ultimately it'll be just part of having a car, right?
Yeah, I think that's the way it's going to go. Yeah, it's a great opportunity.
So we'll look forward to seeing how that one develops. They've got 120 people, so that's not huge in the scheme of things. So to be raising the sort of funds they've got, I think they must be doing some pretty smart stuff. So
absolutely,
will be really fun to watch, and definitely great to see Kiwi at the forefront there. One other thing we've had last week was the land in Southland that we've heard about for basically a really big data centre being established in Southland. Has now been purchased. Reports of it effectively being $1 billion plus project to be able to put these data center, or a big data center that then I guess gets sliced and diced up between varying firms. Have you got a feel for who might do this? I mean, we've heard the discussion around, well, this, from a business continuity and I guess a sort of a perspective of lowering risk for Australian firms, Southland, especially if we get some new fibre that connect, and they're talking about a connection between South America, I think it's Argentina and or Chile and Australia, that could come across and just happen to reach into Southland, so provides another connection and provides a kind of I guess some sort of fallback or offshore backup location for Australian data centres. And of course we're seeing Microsoft and AWS putting some data centres in Auckland, so it could be quite an attractive option to a number of players, right?
Yeah, it was only a couple of years ago that having a New Zealand sort of hyperscale data centre wasn't even on the cards. So there's definitely quite a lot changing. And if you look at what's just happened with Tonga, you can see how important resilience of these fibre cables and all is.
It's not as though Auckland is anywhere near volcanoes, though. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Good point, Stephen.
Yeah. So I think the more resilience, the better. And even the government reached out basically to Elon to say, hey, can you move your Starlink sort of over towards Tonga, please? And he says it's not quite that easy.
That's right. I think it was the opposition. Jumped in with a message there, and Elon was sort of saying, well, possibly if there's really enough need, and it's a pretty challenging situation for Tonga.
Yeah,
and I delved in a little bit because they had their outage 3 years ago, virtually to the week anyway, in late January 2019, where they had a cable break and it wasn't a volcano. and Pacific, who we talked about many times on the New Zealand Tech podcast, came to their aid and helped them out. And apparently the Tongan government sort of inked a bit of a 15-year a deal with them, and then Tonga reneged on it. So so there's maybe things a bit more challenging than what they had to be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our, the Southern Cross cables, all those types of things, they're all coming in on, I think, the eastern seaboard. So, if you do have a large sort of tidal event or something and all sort of in there, you potentially do affect both of the landfalls. So, having additional
don't jinx it.
having additional links and back up, the main trunk.
Absolutely,
absolutely.
The more the merrier, and we've come a long way in recent years, haven't we? There's, we had really just Southern Cross cable network, which gave us two connections, but now we're. How many we got? Where there's sort of three main connections to the outside world in terms of vendors, largely around the Auckland area. So Southland would be very, very good from that perspective. And when crazy things happen in the world, which hopefully New Zealand's reasonably neutral and nobody cares about us, but when they do in some parts of the world, sometimes connectivity can get disrupted, and that these sorts of things have happened.
Absolutely.
In the past. So so the other New Zealand story, and this was neat because I got to be involved in this last week. Our team's been doing some media and production work with non-fungible labs. Who we did a podcast. We've done I'm not sure, at least one podcast, and it must be more than that. With them and I guess looking back a bit further with centrality. And anyway, we've been helping them on some of the content they've been putting out there. And the story goes, if I've got it roughly joined up, that with their project Fluf World, which were their non-fungible tokens, their NFTs, their digital collectible artwork of which they minted 10,000 variations going back. Must be in the direction of 6 months now. That project, they've decided to not just be sort of inwardly looking and so on, but to look at how they can contribute beyond their own project. And so they made a $100,000 donation to Auckland City Mission at the end of last year. $100,000. That sounds pretty cool. Then they got invited to go into Auckland City Mission to meet the team and learn a little bit more about some of the things that were going on. And it seems a sort of a almost off the cuff decision was made to do a little online auction to raise a little bit more to help in the great work that they do. And so last Thursday we ended up helping with a little stream to I guess it was almost a online sort of 1980s telethon, modernised. And so there's this online session where this auction was promoted for selling these NFTs. And so Non-Fungible Labs donated 7 of their Fluf World NFTs. And I think they averaged roughly 30 Ethereum tokens per NFT. I think the total, the auction was 220 Ethereum tokens, which at that stage worth about 5,000 New Zealand dollars a piece. So, there was over $1 million was raised in this off the cuff auction. Now Ethereum moves up and down a little bit, and it's gone down in the last few days. But a very nice result for for charity here locally in New Zealand, and it's really cool to see, the way, a new creative and technology project has been able to invest, back into helping New Zealanders in need. So.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah. Now, we've had a link here to Ozzy Osbourne's NFT project. And look, as we move into this new world of, and I guess not super new, but when we talk about cryptocurrencies and NFTs, this stuff is fairly new to most people, and getting used to some aspects of this technology can be a challenge. And also, as we know, and we'll talk later about more cybersecurity things, there are a lot of cybersecurity risks in the world. And look, if you have an issue with a transaction on your credit card that goes wrong, you can usually call the bank and get a little bit of help.
Yes.
Now, where things are decentralised and there is no sort of central bank that you can go to for help, or a Visa or MasterCard, then you can get, you can potentially get quite burnt. And this is what we heard around Ozzy Osbourne's NFT project, where a scam link was shared, and basically followers got burnt to what sounded like tens of thousands of dollars, or the equivalent of in Ethereum. Not an ideal scenario.
Yeah, well, a lot of these new sort of cryptography-based services aren't yet regulated, so they don't have all of the controls that a regulated entity like a bank or even a neobank would actually have. So, yeah, it's certainly a time to be very wary of these things and look for all of the the normal sort of hallmarks of a scam, like pressure to act now. Sometimes poor grammar and language, and looking to make sure that the link that you're going to is actually got the green padlock and not just going to sort of any old website around the world.
Yeah, and that it is the legitimate URL. And what we saw here was that there was a domain name change, and if I've got the right one, that change of domain name was what or URL is what caused the issue. So there had been legitimate tweets promoting a particular URL, and then that URL changed. Somebody took over the old one and took advantage of it. And so these things are need a lot of expertise. Now, another one I saw, there was one that came up last week, and so what we learnt around the one for Crypto Bats, which was the name of the one Ozzy Osbourne was involved in, as this thing went on for quite a period of time, and even people that had got burnt were messaging the team behind Crypto Bats, and they weren't able to actually bring about a change. So this thing kept on for ages. There was someone who tried to send a dodgy link for Fluf World thing in a Discord, but it was picked up, very, very quickly within moments, and I'm not sure there was, any harm caused to anybody. So you've kind of got these two, levels. You have some people that are really, really switched on, and they have a really good sort of cyber team, looking at things and monitoring things, and then you can have other people obviously just a little bit sort of maybe fly by night in terms of their approach, because we've talked about it many times before. Nobody can be 100% safe from a cyber perspective, right? But
Correct.
You've got to be awake and really, really careful about these things.
Yeah, and the process for doing takedowns of malicious sort of content that is up on a social media sort of platform, there's actually quite a bit involved in doing a takedown. You've got to have reasonable evidence before they'll, the domain provider will actually let you sort of disable things. And quite often you actually have to get through the social, the media platforms, probably abuse sort of backlogs before you actually can get them to actually take the content down, referring to the bad stuff.
Yeah, well, I think in this case, the crypto bats one, it was their own official tweets. They just had to delete their own tweet because they tweeted one URL and then they changed it, right? Yeah. And they didn't check it.
Wow.
I mean, it's a scenario we've seen in varying forms before, but not linked to where somebody clicks on that could be out for a large sum of money, generally speaking. So whereas in this case, a large financial consequence of not dealing with it. So I think the professionalism of some entities within this world of NFT and crypto is going to be quite different from others. So I think that's going to be part of the picture going forward in terms of how much confidence have you got. Part of that with NFTs seems to be, who's on their team, what have they done before, have Trust. They got a roadmap for what they're doing, or are they just dropping something out there and hoping it works? Yeah. Whereas it's interesting to see those that are really active and doing well longer term tend to have a roadmap and all sorts of partnerships going on. So, the things that the Fluf World folks were up to last week, they had, they're working with Snoop Dogg, so they're working with all these sorts of partners, around the world. And obviously, the NFT project that the Bats one, you would think that. You're working with somebody reasonably high profile like Ozzy Osbourne, you'd have your act together, but it doesn't necessarily. It's not always necessarily the case. Right?
The whole ecosystem's got to be there, right? Not. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got an interesting journey ahead on that front. Now, 5G grounding planes in the US is this one I've found quite fascinating because it just seems nuts that the authorities in the US will give out spectrum, and then on the flip side you've got airlines saying, well, if you're going to use that spectrum, we're not going to land it at your airports. And so we had Emirates and others coming in and saying, sorry, we're going to cancel all these flights because of the new 5G that's rolling out. And with 5G, we're seeing new bands being used. Yep. That I guess it's turned out are quite close to the radio bands that have been used in relation to altimeters or altimeters, depending on how you say it. Yep. And that sort of seems to be the issue. So they seem to be working through it. It seems like the carriers in the US are now starting to sort of step back from having to offer this or from offering this service too close to the airports. And then hopefully they get that right. Let's guinea pig it in America. And we get through it. But I mean, it does seem as though, from an outside perspective, that there's not a direct overlap. There is a gap in between the spectrum used by the altimeters and the spectrum used as part of the 5G communications, which is different to what we're using in New Zealand, by the way. So not something we would expect to be needing to deal with here in the short term at least.
Yeah, well, America appears to be doing a major sort of refit on a lot of their traffic control technologies and the likes, and this is possibly part of that refresh. And the aerospace companies sort of and the telcos basically haven't got together to do the integration testing enough yet.
Yeah, we certainly don't want planes falling out of the air, which is not what would likely happen. But if you had the wrong, data and you're trying to land a plane and it says you're 50 metres up and you're actually 2 metres up or something, then that's going to be a problem. So
we have to get all of this 5G working, because I remember when they first launched it sort of over in Spain, it sort of I do remember them saying this is going to become critical basically for autonomous cars and those types of things, and the cell handoffs and everything had to be absolutely right, the latency had to be right. So 5G is going to be an important thing, so maybe we just turn the planes off for a while.
Let's try that, Stephen. Now, other headline, and there just seems to be a lot around NFTs. Maybe it's because I've been looking at what non-fungible labs are doing, and just to give a little bit of an idea of the scale of this stuff. We talk about our big startups, Xero and PushPay and Orion and so on. I did a calculation the other day, and these numbers sort of move around a lot, so they're quite volatile. But a quick sort of back of the envelope calculation, and for non-fungible labs, for their Fluf World NFTs, so about 10,000 of them, they got up to about $30,000 each. So if you do a quick calculation, there you've got a $300 million market cap, and there's not too much being discussed around this stuff, and of course they've got other NFTs as well. So there's a lot of business being done here, and the turnover across their different NFTs is well over 100 million so far in terms of the trading. And with NFTs, what tends to happen is if they change hands, there's a built into the smart contract as a percentage goes back to the original project. So you say $100 million traded. Well, I think with Fluf World, then 5% of that goes back into the project. So those funds are continue to flow. So it's pretty interesting space to watch. But the headline that I read was around Facebook and Instagram. Apparently exploring plans to make, showcase and sell NFTs, and at the moment it's a pretty small percentage of the population that have probably ever purchased or traded an NFT. So this is a thing that could really turn it on its head and mainstream it.
Absolutely, if you've got the big players sort of hooking in, but even 300 million increase in value in the New Zealand tech sector, that's significant, because the sector at the moment is growing by a couple of billion a year. Add another 300 million on this, and if that gets bigger, it's quite significant for the New Zealand economy.
It really is, yeah. So really, really pleasing to see this sort of mainstreaming of it. Will be fascinating to watch in terms of, and of course, Facebook, they've renamed themselves to Meta, so we expect some activity. I think this report had come through from, the Financial Times, so, reasonably, credible type of source, and, we certainly expected something to happen, but I'm not sure I was expecting anything, super, super soon. So, yeah, so we'll see how that plays out anyway. So yeah. All right. Now, so many things to talk about. Microsoft acquiring Activision, $69 billion US. So we're talking, $100 billion, or north of that in New Zealand dollars. It's an incredible sum, so many things that we could delve into on how that will play out, and I think there's going to be some waiting and whether the deal gets approved and so on. But clearly, Sony investors were not too pleased about it because Activision obviously have
less games on their platform,
some pretty key games
titles,
and so the future for Sony could be really dented. So nearly 20% of Sony's value has been wiped out since this deal. I think they've dropped from roughly $130 billion US, and these things are usually in yen, but it's dropped by about 20 billion US dollars. It's a phenomenal amount to be wiped off.
Just shows you the power of actually game titles sort of in the world now. You used to be movies, but games basically are the new gold.
Yeah. Well, it is such a profitable space, and it's still going to be pretty interesting. I haven't seen a whole lot of data yet around how many of these next gen consoles how they're selling. It does seem as though the biggest sort of pressures where I guess you could call it sort of scalping almost, where people have been buying up
the PS5
consoles. It seems to be leaning towards the PS5 rather than the Xbox Series X. Although there's been a little bit of that on the Xbox side, but it seems as though the silliest prices have been on the PlayStation side. But this could really sort of tilt the balance.
I think probably for the next gen past the PS5, this moves maybe a number of the titles back towards the Microsoft sort of favour for their next platform release.
So we've got some interesting years ahead, put it that way. I think the way that Microsoft have been operating with their Xbox Game Pass, where you pay this sort of Netflix style subscription for gaming. Of course, the more titles that they can they can control, that it gives them a lot more flexibility. Cool. And Sony have said in the past that they make comments down the track of, we can't afford to offer that type of subscription yet Microsoft are, and it's continuing to work out pretty well for them, even if they haven't had the most consoles out there. So I think we've got very fascinating times in terms of how it plays out. Intel working on a Bitcoin mining chip, and of course there's been a fair bit of news around Intel, hasn't there? There's a lot of activity, $20 billion going into a new factory for Intel as well, which if that goes ahead, that's going to be reportedly the largest sort of chip factory in the world, and it'll be US based.
Well, they've brought back basically one of the people that was sort of responsible for their prior success, and appears to have sort of overcome a lot of the stagnation that was happening there. So they appear to be playing to win again.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have to give it some time, but there does seem to be an increasing amount of confidence on Intel, certainly internally. From the top down, they're showing a lot of confidence, and whether they're showing too much confidence or whether they're getting it about right, I guess it's going to take a little bit of time to see. But I think it's encouraging to see there being good competition within the microchip market. Been a bit of coverage around the news from Google that they're finally sort of going to I don't know what you say, clamp down on those that took advantage of what used to be Google Apps back in the day. A lot of headlines calling it Google Suite, but these days it's Google Workplace. But in the early days, you could pick up a level of access for free, and you got in at the right time. It seemed as though that was going to be free forever, but free lunches don't always last forever, and they're cutting that off. And it's been quite fascinating having a look through a lot of the online discussions at the likes of Geek Zone and so on, and just seeing the direction that folks are leaning. It seemed to be quite a bunch of people that are saying, "Oh, we're going to go Microsoft, or we're going to do this or that," and the varying other sort of free or low cost options. But people seem quite upset with Google over this one.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly getting urged to actually move to a paid subscription because my Gmail's sort of right on the verge of being too big.
And, Gmail, right.
But losing my Google Sheets would be terrible. I'm going to have to look into this.
It's an interesting one. I would think that it'll work out reasonably well for Google, because look, you're on an ecosystem and you're asked to pay a little bit of money each year. It's not a crazy sum, although both Google and Microsoft have been putting up their prices in recent years. More so on the Google side, though. It's felt as though Google have been trying to squeeze their user base a little bit more. Maybe Microsoft are going to move a little bit more gently on that front.
Well, the Microsoft entry is somewhere around 130 Kiwi a year, if I remember the thing, and I'm not paying Google any money at the moment, so maybe that does need some redress.
Yeah. So but if you are in that position, then you're probably going to need to make a decision at some stage in the not too distant future if you're on one of those older accounts. Now we wanted to delve a little bit before we finish up a little bit around the cybersecurity landscape. As someone that's worked in that space for many years, and obviously an area I'm involved in as well. It's, I think, an area both of us are quite passionate about, seeing New Zealand organisations on the safer side than probably what they often have been, and in many cases the position that they're in at the moment, which isn't always the best. What are the things that are coming up for you? And you're also speaking at a cybersecurity conference in the next couple of weeks or so.
The New Zealand Cyber Resilience Summit on the 8th of February. So
fantastic.
There's some really, really interesting things sort of starting to sort of happen in that sort of space. So
we've had news about Ukraine being under attack, or there being troops along the border. But of course, there's some stuff going on that's been going on in country in an electronic sense in terms of actual cyber attack on that front as well, hasn't there?
Yeah, this is mostly what's called influence operations at the moment. So they're just trying to put fear and uncertainty into the population. So this first round was mostly looking at website defacement of government sites to try and remove the credibility of the government and the likes. Make the population sort of fearful, but it was also part of the posturing with the US sort of and Russian sort of conversation. So it happened ahead of that. But there's these nation states sort of getting into this have got some really serious capabilities these days that even if you go back a number of years ago, the non-Petya sort of attacks basically on the Ukraine took the power supply out and all those types of things. So
and had a big flow on globally in the end, right?
Yeah, correct.
And of course Australia's had some pressure from a nation state putting some pressure on them. Many ways we've been quite lucky as a country that we haven't had quite the same pressure, and it would be interesting to look into how differently we're prepared to Australia, where they seem to be getting a much bigger investment from a government perspective, and I think probably from private organisations as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So,
interesting. It's one way of putting it.
Let's hope it stays in the cybers and doesn't get into kinetic. So, yeah.
So what do you think? We've got ahead for 2022, Stephen.
Yeah. So what I saw over 2021 was you've got companies in cyber sort of security and technology spending tens and tens of billions of dollars to try and keep the bad guys out. Mostly a lot of organisations were trying to defend against ransomware and the likes, and that's where all of these tens of billions of dollars basically is going in to stop the ransomware type vector. But what started happening through 21 was a lot of the more sophisticated actors started to figure out that the software supply chain was vulnerable, and we saw probably a good 10, 15, 20 different sort of news stories that broke around this. One of them was SolarWinds, which broke in the Christmas sort of 21, and then we had the Log4j that broke in the Christmas 22. But before that, between those two, there was about a dozen or so really significant events and incidents that occurred. And what's happening is effectively software developers building stuff rely on their pipelines, and these pipelines rely on open source technology. And the bad guys have now realized basically that they can actually modify this open source technology,
get in there and mess
then
things up pretty bad.
Mess things up and control what actually gets pushed out
distributed on a widespread basis
into enterprises and into tens of thousands of businesses all over the world.
Yeah.
So that is kind of what's in store for 2022. So what I'm talking about at the Cyber Resilience Conference is how you can go about protecting your business, protecting your government agency by enabling software developers to actually take a lot more proactive route to solving the problem of vulnerabilities in the supply chain, and we're hoping that that's going to be able to move the needle basically to protect New Zealand businesses from these types of cyber threats.
That's great because it's a increasing issue, and it needs to be addressed pretty swiftly, I think. So I'll look forward to that. So that's fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us on the show. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Oh, if people want to sort of connect with me online, always happy to do that. You can find me at Stephen P, Stephen P. You'll find me on LinkedIn, and it's probably the easiest way to engage.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thanks everyone for listening in to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We'll look forward to catching you again on the next episode. We should be back for next week. All right. Thank you. Catch you later.
New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community, proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.